Hello everybody, this is Gareth Cahoon Speaks back here with another video. This time I'm reporting about the United Nations rampant anti-Semitism, systematic anti-Israel bias exposed at the US House hearing. House members heard testimony Wednesday on what one lawmaker called rampant anti-Semitism and systematic anti-Israel bias at the United Nations. Make no mistake, anti-Semitic bigotry is at the root of the United Nations hostility to Israel, which is ugly, evil, and manifests itself in the almost every UN entity, said Republican Chris Smith, the chair of the Global Human Rights Subcommittee. The United Nations is unquestionably the world's foremost legitimizer of anti-Semitism, including its most virulent and violent forms. The hearing came after calls for the UN Secretary General to resign when he seemed to justify the Hamas massacre of Israelis, and it focused on one agency in particular where UN employees openly celebrated the October 7th attack on Israel. It also follows Iran's recent appointment to chair a Human Rights Council meeting in Geneva, despite the regime's egregious human rights violations and help in planning the terrorist attacks against innocent Israeli civilians. In its new report, the group United Nations Watch documents how 20 teachers and staff of the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, UNRWA, rejoiced over the massacre of Israeli civilians in their social media accounts. United Nations Watch Executive Director Hillel Muir quoted a post by UNRWA Gaza teacher Omar Ahmed after the Hamas atrocities. Allah is great, Allah is great. Reality surpasses our wildest dreams, the post read. Muir told the subcommittee that the celebration of the attack by UNRWA staff should not have been a surprise, considering what was already known about the agency's association with Hamas. UNRWA staff regularly called to murder Jews and created teaching materials that glorify terrorism, encourage martyrdom, demonize Israelis, and incites anti-Semitism. Muir said Middle East expert Dr. Jonathan Skanzer of the Foundation of Defense of Democracy told the committee UNRWA employees have been exposed as members of Hamas, the terrorist organization that slaughtered 1,400 Israelis in cold blood on October the 7th. This might explain why UNRWA's educational materials refer to Israel as the enemy, teach math by counting martyred terrorists, and includes the phrase jihad is one of the doors to paradise in grammar lessons. Muir said that since the Hamas massacre, the overwhelming majority of statements by UN bodies and officials have pointed the finger at Israel and not Hamas, following a pattern at the UN in which Israel is continually held to a standard not applied to any other nation. At the UN General Assembly last year, there was one resolution on Iran, one on Syria, one on North Korea, and 15 on Israel. 0 resolutions were adopted on China, Venezuela, Zimbabwe, and 180 other countries that deserved it as much, and if not more, Muir said. Republic Kathy Manning said there is no question that certain UN member states, bodies, and the General Assembly have a negative, disproportionate focus on Israel and routinely support singling it out more than any other country in the world. In 2022 alone, UNRWA received 344 million in US funding for an agency that Middle East experts say includes staff who clearly support Hamas. Now, with all that said and done, do any of my listeners and watchers believe that that behaviour can go on in a civilized society? And the United Nations, which is supposed to be this magnificent body that creates peace and does go against war, and I tell you what the United Nations are, or the United Nations is. The United Nations is the useless nothings. That is all that the United Nations can accomplish. They don't lift one finger to Putin, who has laid waste to Ukraine. They don't signal out China for their treatment of the Uyghurs, or North Korea, it's Kim Jong-un. He gets a pass as well. But no, little Israel, that wee nation that is about as big as Wales, or as Northern Ireland. Israel is a small wee country, and yet she gets over 60% of the resolutions that come out of the UN are against Israel. But there's none against the other nations that I just mentioned that are far worse. Why is this? It's called anti-Israel bias, Jew hatred, anti-Semitism. There's no other name for this, and it has to be stopped. They can't continue in their role as a world authority whenever they're demonizing the very state that they enabled to be created. Let's just remember, it was the United Nations that brought Israel together after the horrific happenings of World War II. The UN has and is responsible for most of this hatred that comes to the Jewish people has come by way of the European news and the things they show, where they show little Palestinian children talking to them and saying how they're suffering, and show all the horrific sides of Gaza. But yet and all, when Israel is bombed, or when Israel has a load of rockets fired at her, there's not one bit of news comes out about that. You see, they're slanted. They've got their blinkers on and they don't want to see how Israel is a blessing to the nations. God will bless Israel despite what the United Nations are trying to do to them. Everybody, it's time to stand up and be counted. Let's be proud and grateful friends of Israel, and just say, everybody, that if everybody would say, I'm Israel High, the people of Israel live. The people of Israel live.